Hey, everybody. Welcome to Watches with Dennis, back for another Saturday stream. This time we're going to focus on talking about, as I move my microphone a little bit closer, so I know sometimes my sound gets a little low, um, watch journalism, print journalism specifically. I don't mean magazines because I don't subscribe to any watch magazines, but I'm thinking more along the lines of websites. So not focused on YouTube, not focused on podcasts, but rather a discussion really oriented around those sort of periodicals that are on the web that I like to use. And of course, it'll be interesting to hear what you all like to use in terms of sources for information. So, anyway, I guess to get started, though, we're going to open with some information that I have from what's been going on lately. So, that's always fun to talk about, at least for me. And so I'm going to talk about a new watch acquisition. So I've hinted at this. I wasn't sure if it would come come in time before this video, and it did. So I did a poll actually, and I'm going to share the results. I'm going to share the results as of when I shared what model the watch was with the club members, because at that point I figured it's no longer really fair to let people go ahead and guess because people will at least some people already knew. And I have a short that actually shows the video already that I put out last night. But as a reminder, if you want to support the channel for 99 cents a month, you can by joining the very cleverly named 99 Cent Club. And I have a link in the chat if you should be interested in doing that. So let me share the information of the poll results. So this is what I had noted. I had back on the 20th, I made this post on the channel. And I said, there's a new watch coming, and it is a brand that I've never owned before. Now, I suppose if I wanted to be more fair about it, I should have at least thrown in some models or some makes that were brands I had already owned, so that some people could actually deduce in a better way what maybe the watch would be. But I also thought I've talked to varying degrees about these brands, and based off of those conversations, I didn't think it was going to be that big of a challenge. And apparently I was wrong, because the answer is Zenith. The Zenith is what I got. And obviously, as you can see from these poll results with 36 votes in, that was by far, the least popular option to choose. So let me walk through why I thought maybe, I knew this wasn't totally obvious, but I thought it was more obvious than it was going to go. So I'll explain what my thinking was. And I think I understand in some ways why I'm wrong, why I was mistaken. So you could see Zen and Blancpain ended up being tied, which was nice because for a long time Zen was in the lead, and I was fairly surprised that so many of you were picking that because I didn't think I had been very positive on Zen. I guess I kind of had as a brand though. As I went back, I reinvestigated my own words because I was thinking, I been? I've never promoted really any particular model. I think that's where I was coming from. And hey, Tuna, welcome to the live stream. So I was a little surprised because I thought, and maybe I've said it less on air versus what I've said to people like in real life who I talk to about watches, but I always thought I had indicated while I respect Zen as a brand, there has never been a model that has strongly appealed to me. But I do remember earlier this year when they were getting ready for Time for Watches, I did say they did have a couple of releases that I did like the design of. So I definitely could see with those words, coupled with the fact that Zen is probably the most affordable brand on this list. I think that at least some of their watches versus, I know Longines has some inexpensive stuff too, but that maybe that's where some of you were coming from when you voted for Zen. But I thought I had been pretty clear repeatedly that there's no model that strongly enough appeals to me to want to buy it. So I was shocked that one was up at the top of the list. Blancpain did not surprise me. Blancpain, I've talked at length about the 50 Fathoms bathyscap, and actually it was down to that or the Zenith. The reason why I ultimately did not go with the Blancpain was twofold. One, I don't think that I want the larger size. So the current makes, the current versions of the bathyscap come in two sizes. There's a 38 millimeter, and then there's, I believe, a 43 millimeter. I already have a lot of dive watches that are at that like 43, 44 millimeter range. So I wasn't keen on getting yet another one in that size if I was to get another dive watch. That said, I'm not sure that 38 millimeters is going to be a happy spot for me for a dive watch. I was worried that it would be too small. There is no Blancpain dealer in the Kansas City area, so I cannot just go and try one on to find out for sure. So it would be taking a chance, which, hey, I mean, that's what I do with a lot of watches, that I take chances. We only have so many dealers in this area. We're not a huge market. We're not Dallas and we're not Chicago. So that said, though, I just thought if it was 40, I'd definitely pull the trigger. But it's not, and I don't know if 38 is just too vintage for me. I like 38 millimeter watches. I didn't know if I'd like a 30 millimeter dive watch. That'll become important later. So Blancpain, that's why it wasn't Blancpain, but that was a very good guess. I totally understood people going with that. Longines came in third at 22% of the vote. I've never, this one totally shocks me. I've never at all that I can think of told you all that there's ever been a Longines I wanted to buy. In fact, I went back and checked my video of brands that I'm interested in, but I haven't been able to pull the trigger on. Longines ain't in that list either. So I don't know why any of you voted for Longines. I thought that one was a throwaway, safely discarded as, oh yeah, anyone who's ever watched the channel knows that Dennis is not interested in any Longines watches. But nope, I'm wrong. Again, I think the reason why maybe a lot of people picked it was affordability. Longines is one of the cheaper brands on this list that I've provided. So that would be a good enough reason, I suppose. Fourth was Breitling. Breitling made sense, but I'm also not surprised that was one of the lower picks. I have spoken at length about liking Breitling's Chronomasters. However, I've always praised the newer ones that don't have the chronograph functions mostly. I've also dogged on the Breitling designs that crop into the Arabic hour markers. So some of their like heritage, like the pistachio watch they have and stuff, I like, but for that change. And so I'm not surprised this one was lower on the list because, well, I've praised one model in particular from time to time. I haven't spoken at length about it. I actually don't do very much Breitling coverage on the channel. So that one was bait, and not very many people fell for it, which makes sense. So finally, the correct answer was Zenith, 8%. So you all lose, except for the 8% of you who said yes. I did see someone comment in my 99-cent club group when I posted it. I only shared the picture of the box with them. And so they had speculated that it was a Defy, and it is not. I did look at the Defies. There's always something that Defies run fairly high for not a lot of features, and except for the really uber ones, and they're way too much for me without being able to handle them. Now the answer was actually this. This is the, with my lighting in the back, it's a little annoying. I don't know if I can block it very well. I have a short up already on this, but this is the Zenith original, Chronomaster original. So I'll throw a photo up. It's easier than sharing the than this little webcam. But so the Chronomaster original was kind of in the same boat as the Breitling Bathyscaphe in the sense that this is a 38 millimeter watch, and I have never had a chronograph that's that small. That said, I've owned hardly any chronographs, period. So, and the reason for that, I guess, to give a quick little background for those of you that aren't familiar, and why would you be? I don't really wax poetic about chronographs very often at all. My first nice watch, what I consider nice, not luxury, but nice watch, was a gift. It was a Citizen quartz watch chronograph, and I used the chronograph all the time to time things like for work and stuff. And I wore that watch, I think about a decade, and I really liked it a lot. The issue was, I ended up replacing it. I got my Rolex Explorer 2. So it's like, okay, when I have a luxury watch and I wore that watch like constantly for over 10 years, I don't know where the chronograph is anymore from Citizen. I didn't sell it. I had a burglary back in 2019, which was before I collected watches. It may have been stolen. One of my other watches was not. That was still here. So I don't know. I don't want to claim that it's that. I could have very easily just lost it because that's what I do. I'm somewhat careless. So anyway, I hadn't had a chronograph until I started collecting, and then I had a Hamilton, one of the khaki Pilot chronos. I hated that watch. Again, this was one I just ordered it. I didn't know a play. I didn't even think about I was so new to it. I didn't even think about that I might not actually like the watch. And the problem that I had was it was so I never understood the expression top heavy until I had that watch. And that really describes it. It was top heavy. It felt unbalanced on the wrist. Uh it was there was nothing about it that I liked. And so sorry, I'm struggling because I'm trying to here. We'll just do a screen two share. There you go. So here's a bigger version of the watch. So the so anyway, the it left a really bad taste in my mouth. Plus, I had to have it serviced twice because the movement broke twice, the chronograph function. So I was really paranoid about even using it. I gifted it away to someone else who had a bigger wrist size that I thought might enjoy the watch. But I've stayed away from chronographs since then. This being 38 millimeters, kind of like with the bathyscaphe, I was worried that it would be too small, like there would be legibility issues. I wasn't concerned about wearability. But I knew that this was the classic sizing, whereas I think Blancpain's experimented more with smaller sizes to both appeal to women, but also just because I think they're hearing feedback on that their watches are just too big. So, but again, I don't know if it's like a victim of being shrunk down. This was based on the A386, so it always was meant to be small. This is the original size of the A386. So, given that, I figured Zenith knew what they were doing on balancing it. The fact that it's using the 10th of a second and the big changes, of course, with the new movement, this red hand whips around every 10 seconds. So you can read the 10th of a second really easily. They actually got it on the exterior of kind of where the bezel would normally cover, and then the more interior chapter ring. So they marked them a little bit differently, but it's the same. You can see they're the same indicators. So they made it so it's easy to read the functionality of it, in my opinion. So that's what I ended up doing. And so far, so good. A few complaints, mostly on this was the worst. I'll say. Well, we don't have the review yet, and thanks Tuna for the kind words. I ultimately like this is the worst bracelet sizing I have ever had. I didn't think anything was ever going to displace Grand Seiko's bracelet, but holy crap, was this a pain in the butt. But I'll whine about that more in the review, I'm sure. Anyway, so that was what I did there, and we can move on to a topic that isn't all about like me spending money, but instead me trying to learn, because we all try and learn, don't we? And I want to talk about watch journalism today as our main discussion point. And by that, what I mean is print. And by print, I mean online print, because there probably are still some watch articles that magazines and stuff that you can get. I don't subscribe to any of them myself. So instead, I think what's interesting to go over is where we typically turn to for news. I didn't want to focus on YouTube channels or podcast in this episode. I want to just talk about print. So you can kind of see with the tabs if you want to look ahead, but I have a few, and these are all linked in the show notes in terms of what I use and why I use them. So I thought I'd sort of explain that, and then anyone who's watching live, if you've got thoughts, feel free to throw those into the chat box. And if you're watching it post live, you can always leave comments about which sites you like to use. So all sites have their different strengths and weaknesses, and I'm going to go ahead and start with this one. Actually, I don't think we need to make it as big because we're not really reading anything. I just wanted you. I'll shift over to the side more so you can kind of see me. A blog to watch is probably my favorite. Actually, I will say it is my favorite. Now, a lot of that isn't actually the article, so I do need to put a caveat in there. It's because I really like their podcast a lot. The Only Watch podcast. I'd love some watch podcast suggestions, by the way. So anyone who wants to throw out a suggestion, go ahead. The only ones I listen to currently are a blog to watch, Superlative, which is kind of related. It's in the same family. That's more interview oriented with watch industry folk. And then Fratello's podcast. I've re-added them. I used to listen to them. I took them off for a while, and I've added them back recently. The only other podcast in watches that I've subscribed to audio only was Two Broke Watch Snobs. I did used to listen to them, but their topic areas weren't of interest to me, so I have dropped them. So anyway, blog to watch. What I like about the site and why I kind of recommend them if you're looking for places to bookmark to regularly look at watch news is a few reasons. One, they don't sell watches, and I'm getting I'm getting ever so tired of all these brands that are selling watches and saying they're journalists at the same time. That is, I understand it. I understand that they're in a very difficult position because you want to be able to maintain your site. You need to bring in revenue. How are you going to do that? Advertising obviously is a traditional model, but does that bring in enough to actually have independent journalism? It's very difficult. So I think what a lot of entities end up doing is they start selling stuff because the margins are just better than what they're generating on ads. And the way they do this varies. Some of them, and we'll talk about Hodinkee later, but some of them go full on watch shop style. Some of them sell peripherals, like straps are often a common thing to go down that route, or they try and generate, they do other aspects. So with a blog to watch, they don't sell, like, I don't think they sell anything. So that's really nice. Now, so they have to lean more into the advertising. So one of the things you'll often see on their site is they will have in their article sections. Well, actually, here we go. I'll blow it up here a little bit so you can see better. They'll do sponsored posts. They're all clearly labeled as sponsored posts. It's not ideal in my view. Like, I'm fine with sponsored posts, but I still remember when newspapers would do this. I do wish, like, at least these are carved out in a separate section, but the layout, and I get it, like aesthetically it looks nice, but it does look like identical in layout. So if you don't catch that, when they put it in the section, they also put buy sponsored post on it, like right there, which is helpful. There have been a few times though where I'm just looking at the pretty pictures and I start to click and then I realize it's a sponsored post, which then again, it's still good for getting like the stats and stuff on the watches, but it's not, like, I wish it was a little clearer that they were ads. So even more clear than they do, but they do a good job. It's completely transparent. That's just a preference thing on my part. So welcome to the live stream, Koji. Yes, the relative neutrality. That's my number one reason that I like them. Another thing that I like about a blog to watch, that's going to come up with some of these other ones later, is a blog to watch isn't, I'm going to use the term snobbish. So, and by that, what I mean is they don't exclusively focus on one type of watch. Like, they're not just in the luxury watch space. They're also not what we could maybe describe as reverse snobbish, where they only cover inexpensive watches. They cover watches. And so as a catch-all source of, like, if you want a one shop does it all sort of place, a blog to watch is a good place to start. Now, one thing you need to remember with all of these, none of these sites cover every single watch. So you have to, if you want broad-based news on watches, you will need to bookmark more than one site, especially if you're wanting the information timely. There will be instances where maybe all the major places will cover a watch. So for example, let's say Tudor puts out a new watch. They'll all probably cover it, most of them, those that cover that price point. But sometimes it might be a case where one site will do it day of the news release, and some might make you wait maybe 48 hours more. Just depends on what their staff's doing. Tudor might be a bad example because they know where their clicks come from. And if it's just anything like YouTube, and what YouTube's algorithm tells me, you talk about Tudor as soon as you can because you get a disproportionate amount of views. So let me know if you're interested in, like, if that side of stuff interests you. Like, if you want me to do a video about, like, what my YouTube analytics look like, if you're kind of curious, like, what does a small watch YouTubers, like, what gets the views and how do the stats work and stuff. Half Past Blog, I believe, did something like this a few months ago, and I found it very interesting. But of course, I'm making content, so it's interesting to me because it relates to, like, what do you do that generates interest? Because, well, a site like a channel like this doesn't generate much in the way of dollars. I mean, I could tell you my average is probably about $50 a month US is what I generate on AdSense, and memberships. But obviously, if you spend like 6 hours putting together a video and it gets 300 views versus spending 1 hour to put together a video that gets 3,000 views, which one makes more sense to do, just in terms of a time investment, regardless of the money? It's just sort of like, what do people want? You don't want to spend a lot of time making something no one is interested in. But anyway, blog to watch. Like them a lot. Their podcast, I think, is excellent. Biggest complaint I have with them, aside from how I kind of wish the sponsored posts were even more clearly demarcated, is they do not lay out a good section of watch stats. So again, if I'm wanting to know, like, what's the lug to lug? What's the case diameter? What is the water resistance? They'll often have all of it, in the text of the article, but not pulled out in a convenient way. I like stats to be pulled out to the side. I get it because they're writing an article that they want to be conversational with it. And I do think that it's perfectly fine to put that in conversationally. But as a written reference, which is what all of these are, having something clearly demarcated with just the stats, the price, and all the rest of it, it's just so much easier. It makes my life easier when I'm doing content. Now, that being said, most of the time when I do content and I do like a first thoughts video that you see, so I'm not doing a review, but I'm giving you all the basic stuff, which maybe I should be pulling out, putting it on the screen. But I think it's a little different with video. I usually end up just going to the website once I see the articles. I go to the website of the watch manufacturer for two reasons. One, they usually very clearly have their stats laid out, other than lug to lug. So many manufacturers still don't list their lug to lug, so I often need to pull that from someone else. If they've had hand on time with it. A lot of times these watch journalism sites haven't handled the watch yet either. So they don't know the lug any more than I do. The other thing, though, is going to the website is that has to do with a image use, like copyright. So again, you can do a lot under fair use when you're doing reviews, transformative things, and reviews. News coverage are often exceptions. I won't bore everyone with the U.S.'s rules on free speech and fair use rights. But it's cleaner than I've pulled before from sites like news sites. I try not to. And in fact, I can't remember the last time I did it. And the reason is if I go to the manufacturer's site, they're not in competition is the argument. They can't claim that I'm sabotaging views to their article because they don't have an article. They're just trying to sell a watch. And I'm not trying to sell a watch. So we have different interests. And so part of the argument where you get to claim fair use, long story short, is what you're doing is distinct from wherever your source was. So they're in the business of selling watches. Their images are marketing materials. They want them to be shared. So it just solves all the problems to do it that way. And usually manufacturers have good, if not good photos, at least good renders. But your mileage may vary. So let's talk Fratello. Fratello is probably the second most common site that I use. As I noted a little bit ago, I do once again subscribe to their podcast, but I only added that back last week. Fratello, in a lot of ways, the write-ups, I like the writing format, the style. They have some really interesting discussions on their actual site. In fact, I think their comment section, theirs and Hodinki's are probably the best comment sections in the biz. A Blog to Watch also has a comment section. I don't tend to find it as interesting. It depends on the watch. It depends on the watch. But Fratello, at least lately, over the last few months, has been willing to have some fairly controversial articles. So for that alone, it's good entertainment. So if you ever want to get your dander up over a watch discussion, I think recently, I don't even know if it's still going to be here on the scroll down. I think if we go latest, maybe I can find you an example because they revisited one. There we go. Yeah, let me blow it back up here. Let me revisit that. They had Don had a article a little while ago. I heard about it last week and then I went and read it where he basically went and said that watches that are like budget watches, but essentially watches under $1,000 as mechanical pieces don't make any sense for people to buy. The article was more nuanced than the headline suggested, or at least I felt it was, in the sense that he was really articulating about he was annoyed that people would do a full movement swap on a budget watch rather than actually service the movement. And he felt that, this is my nutshell summary, he felt that essentially stole the watch's soul at that point. And so why would you buy a watch where no one's actually going to work on it for you? They tell you, the watchmakers tell you it makes more sense to drop in a new Miyota movement rather than service, like it's a better time investment. And so his position was, well, if you're going to be soul stealing the watch, then you might as well just have a quartz watch and avoid the service entirely and just do a battery change. Not my perspective. You get that whole, what is it, the ship of Theseus thing going on where how much of when you swap so many pieces, is it no longer the same watch anymore? I don't know. The memory, to me, the memories, the features, the aspects of the watch are really on the outside of it. But I don't get all hung up on it. Like when I had my Explorer 2 serviced, polishing. When I sent it in, I told them only polish the bracelet. I was fine with the bracelet being polished. They didn't want to polish the case. But that was a value perspective because everyone online was like, they'll polish the case and they'll ruin the shape and all of that. And the watchmaker actually contacted me. He's like, I'm a professional. I can do a good polished job where it's just going to take out some of the light scratches. I'm not going to go after the deep stuff. Your case shape's not going to change. The watch will look better. And I was like, you know what? You convinced me. Let's do it. I wasn't planning to ever sell the watch anyway. Came back. I still see some of the key scratches I put into the thing. And otherwise, it just looks like a cleaner version of the watch. Friend of mine, he's been on the channel a few times on the live streams, Tony. His Super 7 watch, he's the orange dial dive watch he has, the movement quit working. I took it apart to look at the going train because it wouldn't hold a wind anymore. And he was like, it's not holding wind. And it was right at the end of its warranty. And I said, and he'd have to send it overseas because that's a European company. And I said, do you want me to take a look? I opened it up. I didn't see anything wrong with going train. I didn't see any pieces out. So I assumed the mainspring probably broke in the barrel. And I said, the easiest thing to do at this point, especially if you don't want to like pay a watchmaker, is I could probably just buy you a Miyota movement because that's what it used and drop it in and just replace the dial and hands. He said he was okay with me trying it. And like, I bought the movement. It was under $50. And so I did the swap and the watch is working again. And I gave him the old movement back. So if he wants the authentic historic Miyota instead of the other factory produced Miyota that I slapped into it instead, he's got it, but it's still got all his scratches. It's still got his same hands, same dial, same case, same sapphire. I didn't change anything else. I just swapped the movement. And I don't know. Last I saw he was wearing it. So I guess that worked out. So that was an interesting thing. So I wasn't meaning to focus on Dan's articles in particular, but I think Fratello, the original article, if you go and find it, and it's not hard to find. Holy cow. I had over 200 comments last that I looked. It blew up. People got pissed. And that's a good discussion. So, even though I disagree with the article, and I didn't leave a comment, but people got really, really upset. And that's interesting. It's interesting people get upset in a hobby. And it kind of took it personal. Like he was sort of dogging on budget watches, I think, where a lot of people maybe jumped to, I don't know. I read the article and I see where they got annoyed, but I also think they made a lot of assumptions based off of the content. But anyway, that's a good enough reason, in my opinion, though, to bookmark a site like that is for information. Their reviews are good too. So that's another reason. They do a lot of good coverage on watches, great photos as well. One of the things I do as a go-to for sites is I want to see good photos. Let me catch up real quick here on the chat. Let's see. Tuna says, thing is Seiko 5 tends to last forever. You see, and I don't know how old the watch was that he was using. It was a friend of his watch that he was talking about, and that he went to pick it up for him, and he found out the movement got swapped, and it irked him. Which, I mean, if it bothered the owner, they should have said something going in, and maybe they didn't know any better to say something. Well, let me give you another case in point. Oh, and let me, and Cloud, one of our 99-cent club members is here in the chat. Welcome, Ken, Cloud Ken. And I'll share that link again if you want to support the channel and help me make huge monies with 99 cents a month. I don't get to keep all 99 cents. YouTube takes their cut. They're very cruel, the YouTubers. The other thing, though, is my example. So I have a pin lever escapement watch, my Spiro Agnew watch. I wear it from time to time. It's my one vintage piece. Those of you who know about that watch, if you know about pin lever escapements, I should say, that was what people did for cheap watches before quartz. Movement has no value. They're not meant to be serviced in the sense that you can still take them apart, and it's not like the Timex version of the pin lever where they're not designed to be taken apart. These are still the same structure, but with the pins and stuff, there's so much friction. The assumption was people just throw away the watch once it was done. I went to have it serviced because I took it apart, I reassembled it. I could not get it to run consistently. So I was like, I can't solve it. I had some donor movements I bought online. I took it to a watchmaker. Watchmaker wouldn't work on it. Said he doesn't do pin lever. Not worth it. Took it to another watchmaker. He said, yes, I'll do it for you, but I'll charge you $200 for it, which I don't know how much the watch was worth. I told Tony because he gifted it to me, and he was like, it was way less than that from the antique store. And originally when they were sold, they were $15. I'm like, I don't care. I'll pay the $200. That's fine. So, and that's back to like what Tuna said, like with the Seiko 5, if you do end up like it's finally just not keeping good enough time anymore and you're upset and you don't want to change the movement, just you go, as far as I know, you can just go to a watchmaker and say, I don't want you to replace the whole movement, service it. And they'll say, okay, it's going to be $250. And you'll say, yeah, okay. And you'll be like, well, the watch cost $100. Are you okay paying $250? If it's that important to you, just pay the $250. I mean, it's still cheaper than way more many watches out there. So for me, it's just like, if you want something to work, and you went, then you have a cheaper option to go about it, or you just replace the watch outright. And if the watch is special to you or whatever, then you can have it serviced. Long and short of it, on the Spiro Agnew watch, I would have been perfectly happy removing that movement and putting in a proper jeweled movement. I didn't think about asking about that at the time because I don't know what movement size would be needed that will hold those hands. Because since the dial says Swiss made, I'd still want to use a Swiss movement. That's my one condition that I put to it, because I don't want the dial to be a lie, and which is weird, but I'm willing to throw out a pin lever because pin lever is a piece of crap. But, I want a Solita or something to go in there to do it instead. But it needs to be able to hold those same exact hands because it's a novelty watch and the Spiro Agnew hands need to be the Spiro Agnew hands. Otherwise, I'm basically just building a whole watch from scratch. Anyway, Fratello, good articles, very good discussions, very active comment section. They tend to, opinion-wise, this probably comes up more in the podcast, so I wouldn't worry about this so much when it goes to like navigating their site. They seem to skew a little traditional, so just be aware, like in terms of their personal opinions. Again, it's a live stream. I can rant about what I want. I was listening to one of their more recent episodes, and they kind of talked about, and I imagine they have a write-up of it here somewhere, but they talked about like building a 3-watch collection. Like, what would you do with a 3-watch collection? And they kind of like did their 3-watch collection and then did like lower cost alternatives or substitutes to it. And so they went through them, and the 3-watch collections were very traditional. In fact, I would probably describe it, at least one of their individuals was like, his picks were Omega Speedmaster, Relic Submariner, Patek Philippe Calatrava. If you were to ask AI to build you a 3-watch collection that everyone would recognize and respect, I don't think you could get any more predictable. So that's a similar vibe I get out of them. Is they is the angle that they come from is a little traditional. So just be aware of that. Their article coverage, I still think is good enough, neutral enough. That's not a big deal. However, they do have some flaws with their approach as how they run their site. Fratello does a ton of collaborations. It's quite frankly really annoying. Here's one right here on their homepage. Ready, set, go. The Fratello X Nevada. Nevada. How do they do it? Like I'm talking to you guys. How do they say that? Nevada. I always want to say NVIDIA, but that's a video graphics card maker. Nevada Grand Charades. Anyway, they do collabs like constantly. It's like, it almost feels like they haven't found a collab they'd ever say no to. I feel like I'm always reading about collabs with them. So they're doing a lot of that stuff. And they've got a shop section. You can see it here. Kind of like Hodinkee, which we'll be talking about next, in fact. But so you see, they're really shilling their stuff there. So rather than going like the sponsored post route that Blog to Watch does, they're slinging product. And they do straps too. They're big. When I mentioned that at the start, some of these places also do peripherals for watches rather than focusing so much on watches. Straps to me are less of an issue. It's when you start selling watches, especially when you start doing collabs like this, just you need to, as a news connoisseur or a consumer really trying to go and find news to cover, to read. Like if they're collabing with Oris, are they going to dog on a bad Oris watch if Oris releases a bad watch? It's not that they won't. It's that you can't be sure where they're able to control the bias. And that's just something to be aware of. So their journalistic chops are put into question simply because they've decided to go a route where they're partnering with the watch brands. We can't, as consumers of their content, be sure where the line ends or begins in the sense of where does their journalistic neutrality able to go up to, and is there editorial influence on the marketing side of things because they sell this stuff. So, and Blog to Watch doesn't have that. Their content's really good, though. I do think they walk the line pretty well, and that's why they're my second most turned to source of news at this stage. Is just because I think I'm not sure how they draw their line. I still, for a lot of the regular article coverage, it feels neutral to me, so I've been willing to trust it. But I'm always looking with a critical eye on them because they've dipped their fingers into a lot of pies in the watch world at this point, and I don't like how much commingling is going on between their journalism and where they're making their money. Comments. So Tuna says, but Dennis, a pin lever is appropriate for a watch such as that. Absolutely. The thing that I'm thinking about, and that's why I went and paid the ridiculous, $200 was completely fair for the watchmaker's time, but ridiculous for the value of the watch. That's why I went ahead and paid it. The thing is, long term, the pin lever is probably going to fail, and it's going to be too hard to get the parts. I have a few donor movements, so maybe not, but it keeps garbage time. It's finicky. Even now, sometimes when I wind it, especially after I've let it sit for a while, I might have to shake it some, and then I usually have to watch it. And once it gets going, it's okay. But the watchmaker said he struggled with it. And again, it's not too surprising. He basically got it to run. He didn't get it to run remotely well. Like the amplitude stuff's fine. They're just not accurate. And yes, completely authentic to the watch. However, long term, I'm not sure constantly dropping in pin levers and getting them fixed up is going to keep the watch functional. So for comfort reasons, I might say it's probably time to go ahead and just move to a jeweled movement and celebrate the wackiness of the dial and not really celebrate what was at the time the most commonly produced Swiss pin lever movement in the world. But since they made so many, maybe I can just keep getting garbage movements and dropping more and more of them in. But honestly, it'll probably be just dropping in whole new movements and not servicing the pins will go bad. So this is the thing. But yeah, no, it's true. That's why I went ahead and did it. Because I was, again, in the end, and again, not to sound snobbish, but it was like, I went in and I was like, it's $200. I'm not going to stress about this. It's $200. I'll pay for the service. And that's what it's going to be to keep fixing it up like every 5 years. That's less than I usually start service costs at $250 in my mind for common movement. So at $200, yeah, sure, no problem. Yes, Koji, the novel 3 watch collection. And the thing is, I was going to say I like all his picks, but I don't like the Moon watch. I don't hate it, but it doesn't speak to me. It's not a watch I'm interested in outside of maybe like one of the ones with Snoopy on it. Submariner, I love the Submariner. It's a classic, right? There's nothing creative about it. It's an icon. And the Calatrava, it's an icon as well. So I like the Calatrava too. I just like, I was listening to the episode. It's a fun episode just to hear the arguments, but I was just like, because the guy was, he was really passionate about it. He's just like, on the Speedmaster, he's like, I just think everyone needs a Speedmaster. And I'm like, I totally disagree. I think nobody needs a Speedmaster. If you love a Speedmaster, you should get a Speedmaster. But I don't ever look at anyone's collection and go, you know what you're missing? You're missing a Speedmaster. I've never thought it. Not ever. I guess maybe if they had a collection of Omegas and they were just like, I collect Omega, and they didn't have a Speedmaster, I would say, you need a Speedmaster. You need a Moon watch for sure. That's the one thing missing in your Omega-centric collections. Like you got DeVille's, you got Constellations, you got Seamasters, but there's no Speedmaster. That would be weird. But other than that, I never think it. But that's the fun thing about watches. We all have very, very different takes. Speaking of different takes, let's move to the third of my 6 sites that I generally turn to for news, Hodinkee. Now, as I rub my sinuses, okay. Hodinkee is Hodinkee's like Gandalf the Grey. Do you know Lord of the Rings? Where you're going to learn about Lord of the Rings now. Hodinkee's like, if you haven't read the books, if you've at least seen Fellowship of the Ring, right? Gandalf stands off. He's the wizard. He's trying to do right. He's trying to be the thing. That's Hodinkee. He was trying to do it. He was the big power, right? He was the big powerhouse in watch journalism, right? Then he met the Balrog. The Balrog is the Hodinkee shop. And he was going to try and keep things separate, but dang it, that you shall not pass staff thing didn't do enough. He got a little flame whip around his ankle, yanked off, and he's fallen into shadow and flame. That's Hodinkee. Hodinkee has fallen into shadow and flame. I don't know what Hodinkee wants to be anymore. Their watch coverage, when they cover watches, is still pretty strong in my opinion. They have a decent comment section. In fact, it's probably more active than Fratello's to this date, but I'm not as sure anymore on it. They do a lot of hands-on stuff. So they like weak on the wrist and this, or like right now here on the screen, you can see they have a hands-on on the Citizen ProMaster. They actually cover a range of watch price points. So it's not, I always got a little annoyed with Hodinkee because I feel they skew kind of ultra luxe in some instances, like covering limited edition, six-figure watches that no one can own. But those things should be covered. It's just sometimes I feel like that's what they focus on. But they do actually cover a range when you dive into the article. Sometimes I think you get a little skewed on when you see like what their coverage on watches and wonders is. But I mean, again, like here, the Richard meal, I'll blow it up here, like covering a Richard meal, not a lot of practicality to it. But again, these are things that are important to the watch hobby. And they did cover the Timex 1972. So they've got a blend. They've got a blend. But you see beyond the shop stuff like this, 5 days in Italy, driving the 2023 I'm going to butcher I don't know cars. Mille Miglia. So, all right. So it's an article about cars. And that's the thing. They went like full on lifestyle brand and they aren't just about watches anymore. Plus they're slinging the shop stuff constantly. Now, I think they've gotten better than they used to be about carving out what they're trying to do. But here's the problem. They sell new watches, not just pre-owned. And it's dangerous enough if you have a big pre-owned share of something, I think, and you're covering the company that's still in existence. But when you're here selling Bulgari and Omega and Bell & Ross on your main site, how do I know that your journalists are separate from all of that pressure? I don't know. I don't know that. So that's my big problem with Hodinkee is I think they're shot. Plus, they sell insurance. Now, insurance at least that's an interesting business model because at least that's separate from the journalism. Like I think that's okay. I think it's okay. But they're so revenue driven. They hunger so much for it. I mean, they're like, we sell used watches, we sell new watches, we sell insurance, we do collaborations. You know, one of the things I whined about with Fratello is all the collaborations, which further entwine you with these brands that you're purportedly covering with an objective lens. You also have business dealings with them. Makes me very uncomfortable. But my bigger reason why I rank Hodinkee below Fratello, even though I still turn to Hodinkee a lot, is they lost so many of their good journalists. I think when Jack left for Watchbox, that was like the death bell of their last like really good writer. And maybe their new people are decent writers as well. But Jack had a good romantic way about writing, very different outlook than me. I feel I fall more in this sort of logical, data-driven camp. But so it was nice to read someone who looked at things through like a more romantic lens. Like he was a good storyteller. He is a good storyteller. And I liked a lot of the content he was generating for Hodinkee. Like he had some YouTube stuff that was really interesting, answering questions and stuff. And I really liked his articles. He'd go a lot into the history. So he was very detailed with them. And now he's not there. And I feel like they didn't try and fill that. I think it felt more like they hired a whole bunch of younger writers so they could pay people less money and then just kind of limp along and try and get their stuff in. Like, well, we're going to get more clicks now because we're going to get car people and stuff. I just don't get it. I just don't like it, I should say. I kind of get it. Koji writes in the chat, I am biased with the Dink because they were kind enough to do a small article about my collection, but a lot of the really good journalists have left now. I still read some of their older articles. Yeah, I mean, no, there might be some people that were like anti-Hodinkee from the get-go or from when they did whatever, brought in investors. I'm not. I still use them. These first 3 of these 6 sites I'm covering are actually the ones I turn to at least weekly. Honestly, more often than that, because I rely on them a lot to get ideas for videos. Now, one of the things that to date I really like about Hodinkee is the photos remain great. Great photography. Again, all of these sites have great photography though. So that's honestly, that's not a strong selling point. But all right, this wasn't a good example because it was a hands-on, but when we'll do this introducing. One of the things that The basics. It's so simple and it's so effective. And I appreciate it so much. Hodinkee does not make me hunt for watch stats. Like if I'm actually thinking about shopping for a watch, no, obviously I'm not gonna shop for a Richard Mille, but like say I want to shop for a Timex or whatever. I want to know this stuff. They lay it out. They lay it on the same way all the time. They lay out the basics of the brand and then they do the movement. And then they do pricing at the end. I don't care what the order is, but they make it clean. It's like diameter, thickness, lug to lug, bolded, 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 all super spelled out. Just what you need to know. All the basics that anyone who collects watches is going to be interested in understanding, or people who buy watches and want to wear them, interested in. Likewise, same with the movement. You're interested in the power reserve. You're interested in the beat rate. You're interested in the jewel count. It's all clean. So Hodinkee has maybe of the 6 I've got, I would say the second best way of laying it out, but I actually turn to them so much. It's the one I always think of. And so for that reason alone, I still rely on them as long as they've covered the watch. I still rely on them an awful lot because they do have some interesting approaches. I just think they're shotgunning it at this point, and their brand ties. Like I feel Fratello still maintains some journalistic distance. I don't get that impression out of Hodinkee. Hey, Hey, you're never late. You're always on time. You're like a wizard. I already did a Lord of the Rings reference, so we have to do another Gandalf reference. The other thing with Hodinkee, I did a video on that. It wasn't a very popular video, but it's still on the channel if you want to go back and watch it. I think I did it last year. Excuse me. I went and loaded up every review for a 12-month period that they did. I read all of them and I analyzed them for critical statements. And in my video, I define what I mean by that in terms of like saying something negative about the brand. The percentage was super low. I don't trust shills. And whether they mean to or not, Hodinkee's inability to be critical of anything, and I'm using hyperbole because there was some critical statement. There was one author in particular who wrote in that year period who was more likely than anyone else to be critical. And it was tame. It was tame. It was usually stuff like complaining about the bracelets or the straps or whatever. But if I remember right. But anyway, long and short of it is, if you're someone and you say you're a journalist, or you're doing like review. I mean, these were reviews. These weren't first thoughts. I understand with first thoughts. I understand with thought pieces. When you're doing a review and you don't have anything critical to say, like everything what luck you must have that every watch you've ever experienced is a 100% winner. I guess we should just buy all these things. How helpful have you been? Wow. What a great contribution to society. That's sarcasm, by the way. That's my problem. That's my big problem with Hodinkee is it feels to me like they have an editorial edict that you better not be mean to these brands because we're going to be doing collabs and we sell a bunch of them. It's just hard to trust. It's too bad too because they've got such great coverage and content otherwise, but I just don't trust them very well. But I still use them a lot. Monochrome, I don't. These last 3 of the sites, I still recommend them. All of these are ones I recommend. Again, my video description has links to all of these, so if you want to bookmark them, you can. Monochrome has some really cool reviews, so I like that a lot. Again, car coverage. I just want watches. I know I'm weird. I know a lot of watch people are into cars, and that's fine. I get it. Like I can see where the mind stuff goes. I don't expect everyone to be into pinball. I mean, that would be weird, but I would understand it if people are, because I know a lot of watch people. There's a whole Pinside, the biggest pinball forum in the world, has a section on watches that has many, many pages because, hey, people are into mechanical things and cars are like that. They lean, as you can see here, on the shop side. I do like them a bit better in the sense that they do the strap and like winder thing, not selling watches thing. So I don't question their neutrality the same way that I think you need to be suspicious of Hodinkee and Fratello. Monochrome, though, skews luxe. They're luxury. They skew luxury. So I don't think they're a good site for anything on budget news. And that's obviously a very big part of the watch market. So I mean, maybe they do some. Maybe they do some coverage. You would think they would feel they need just from a click perspective to do stuff like Seiko, for example, and that's why I'm scrolling to see what their coverage is like. All right, this is just basic news stuff. Okay, so they have good. I mean, but they have good reviews. They have good details on brands. But I don't have a lot to say about them. Again, as all of these great photos, all of that stuff's wonderful. Just not my go-to unless I'm wanting to learn more about a watch. That's what I don't use them usually for like my YouTube research. Outside of maybe some other thoughts, like a lot of times when I do a review video of a watch I own, I will read what other people have focused in on, so I know if there's an area that maybe isn't a issue for me, but I want to touch on it because for a lot of people it is. So, case in point would be with my Grand Seiko when I did the review on the. If I hadn't had a bad experience with the bracelet, I still would have brought it. I wanted to bring up that people have issues with the bracelet because it came up in a lot of discussions. So a lot of times I'll turn to other people's reviews to see where they focus in on, and I can analyze if I think it's a problem or not, and then I can still bring it up and say I don't have an issue with this, but buyer beware. Like people have problems sizing the Grand Seiko bracelets or whatever. So that sort of thing. But monochrome, it's all right. I don't use it a lot. Time and Tide. This is another one I usually just use for my own personal watch research and don't rely on them much when it comes to like YouTube content sort of stuff. They though have really really nice breakdowns on stats on watches. So as a let me see if I can like we load up this Norcane thing. Give you a case in point. Here we go. I think they actually lay this out even better than Hodinkee does. Like I like the table. I just think it's a cleaner look because Hodinkee still keeps theirs kind of in the article format and they do the bold thing, and it's super. Like both are great. Don't get me wrong, both are great. They're my two favorite for stats. This I just think is a better way to lay out overall. I think for a buyer in particular, like they don't carve out the movement separate from the base stuff. It's all just sort of here. They spend less time. I don't think most people, when they're shopping for watches, honestly give two shakes of lamb's tail about how many jewels are in a movement. Like you're going to look up the movement stats if you're that person. Most people aren't into that. So I think this, like from a practical standpoint, Time and Tide does a better job of structuring it all. However, I honestly don't use them all that much unless I'm wanting more detail about a specific watch. And I usually will be doing like a Google search and I'll see Time and Tide and I'll go, okay, definitely want to read up on it more. I use their YouTube far more than I use their written articles. But much like Fratello and Hodinkee, as you can see, they sell watches. So again, I grain of salt it when I see their articles. But I wanted to throw them out there because I do think they're a good source of info. And the last one that I wanted to bring up is Worn and Wound. I tend to think of Worn and Wound as more on the affordable end coverage. So if you're getting like tired of recommendations of all these watches, sites that focus on things that you're never going to buy, and you're more into lower cost tiers, this could be a really good place to go. They have an interesting monetary aspect because they're doing a lot of these like wound events, like meetups, watch meetups, and they have a whole thing. But they do have a shop. I think they made their name on straps, but they do collabs as well. So again, grain of salt. They do a whole bunch of collaborations, and so they are not inexplicably, but they are intricately entwined with watch manufacturers, certain watch manufacturers. And so as annoying as it is, once again, I have to tell you, at least with the brands that they've ever collabed with, you have to take it with a grain of salt if they're going to be honest in the coverage. It's unfortunate, but that's just the way that it is. So anyway, those are the six that I use. Obviously, all of them have various flaws, which is why I use multiple sites. But again, as just a recap, you'll see them all in the description below. A blog to watch I like the most on neutrality. Fratello and Hodinkee round out my top three that I use, especially when I'm looking at content that maybe I want to cover in video format. And those are the order I really do those three. The other three, Monochrome, Time and Time, Worn and Wound, are more occasional for me. I especially like their in-depth coverage. But aside from a blog to watch and Fratello, I'm very suspicious of most of these. The Monochrome does a good job about being distanced from the brands in terms of like what they sell. Fratello, I just get the vibe that they have some better walls in place, or at least when I read their coverage, they feel critical still. Whereas a brand like a journalism brand like Hodinkee just doesn't feel critical. Like, they're great photos. If you want to hear positive things about a watch you're looking at, go to Hodinkee. If you want to hear negatives, go ahead and check them out, because I don't think you're going to find a lot negative. And it's super suspicious is all. I don't think they mean to be. And I'm not saying that it's because of that. It may just be that they realize they catch more readers with honey than vinegar. But you can't help, in my view, you can't help critically, but be suspicious of any entity that can't bring itself to say something negative about the industry that it covers. And Hodinkee does sometimes say negative things, but they're few and far between, and they're typically pretty mild. So just a concern. So, chats, let's see, catching up with that. Koji says, have you read Quill and Pad? They're quite good, in my opinion, and clearly state on their site who they partner with. I have. I do not turn, but not much. I've normally gone to Quill and Pad because I've seen a recommendation for an in-depth article. So, for example, I know Tim Masso with Watchbox has done writing for them, like where he'll do like an in-depth piece. So I never even, and this is unfair because I'm sure based off of what you've indicated, Koji, that they actually do journalism. I've always thought of them more as long form, like pieces, articles about watches, and not current event coverage. So yes, I've read them, but not for current events, only for like in-depth, like watch analysis sort of stuff. In fact, I've actually, since I heard Tim mention on one of his YouTube things that he's written for them a couple of times, I have thought about, if I were to write, maybe writing and submitting to Quill and Pad. I don't know what I would write about. The thing about watches, forgive me, my throat was getting sore. The thing about watches is this is a small hobby, but it's a bigger hobby than I'm used to. So because I came from pinball, so there's already a lot of coverage already in pinball. This is not meant to be a toot your own horn thing, but I actually wrote a number of pretty successful articles about the history of the game and stuff, and I was able to find things that no one had written about before, because the hobby is so small. People would take the low-hanging fruit and talk a lot about things that they like, the stuff people were really passionate about, like WMS, Williams Bally Manufacturing. Like, those had really good articles, but there wasn't a lot, like there weren't articles that were exploring the history of the street level series of games by Gottlieb Premier, and there weren't articles like analyzing center pop pinball machines where they put a pop bumper between the flippers and things like that. So I did, like, I don't know, 6 to 10 articles on, so especially on the history of pinball. And I would just give those to sites that would run print, because I do podcasting, but I didn't host a print site, and I wasn't interested in hosting a print news site. So I would write articles, but it was nice to find homes. I did them all for free. I never asked anyone for money to do articles. I was just like, hey, I want to do some research on this, and I want it to live somewhere so people can read about it and maybe learn about something. So that's what I think of Quill and Pad, was a place like that. But it sounds like they're more than what I give them credit for. But no, it's not a regular. One of the things I do like, as a FYI for folks, if you're kind of like, I just want to sort of like get a list of news, one of my favorite things to do is, if you have I can't find it on their website, but you have the Chrono 24 phone app. You go to the phone app, there's a news tab, and you click on it, and it actually is just like scraping all of I don't know if Hodinkee's in it, but they scrape a lot of these watch blogs, and they just list the subject, the headlines, and you can click, and it'll take you to the site, and you can read them. I use that a lot, especially to know about recent releases. I'll just load up the Chrono 24 app, and they're sorted by date. And so a lot of times it'll be the same watch. Like Black Bay 54 comes out, you're going to see a whole bunch of Black Bay 54 articles, but you'll see which site it is and the headline, and you can choose which ones you want to go ahead and read. Really cool. I wish Maybe it's there on their website and I just don't know where the tab is, but I never see it when I go there. So I always do it through the phone, which is, I mean, it's just once I know the site that has the article, like if it's Worn and Wound, I can just go to Worn and Wound and it'll be right there at the top, but because they're sorted by date. So it's never been hard for me to, take that as research or read it on my phone and then later just go back and pull them like how I pull them all up as tabs for you here. That's sort of how I do it. So I usually actually use the Chrono 24 app to monitor a whole bunch of sites. I've just found over time to go to Hodinkee, Fratello, and Blog to Watch because those were the main ones I've been turning to for whatever reason. And Fratello and a Blog to Watch show up in the app. I don't remember if Hodinkee does, but I had already been in the habit of reading Hodinkee because it used to be the big go-to news site, and I still think it's very strong. Just be aware of what their limitations and weaknesses are, which is true for all of them. I mean, as much as I love a Blog to Watch's neutrality, I don't like how they write up on watches a lot. I don't like that they don't summarize the stats well. So almost always, if I'm doing research, I need to go somewhere else beyond theirs because theirs is a little too blog article style and not enough watch stat summary style. Again, everyone has their own journalistic approach, and their sites all have their own strengths and weaknesses. But anyway, that is it for this live stream. Thank you, everyone who tuned in. I hope you found it at least somewhat entertaining to go through that. I've thought about doing some other stuff. If I need to process more podcasts if I want to do one on podcasts. I could do YouTube, but that's a little weird because, again, we talked about watch biases in journalism when you're selling watches and also writing about watches. It's a little weird if you're talking about YouTube and then it's easy for people to see the other YouTube channels as competitors, which I don't view it that way because you all are going to watch whatever you want to watch. It's the videos don't go away. It's not like you have to see things live. So if someone wants to go and watch, Teddy Baldassar, it doesn't hurt my channel because they can always watch this one whenever they want. The videos stay up forever or as long as I let them stay up. So that's always been my logic. So I've never seen it the same way. They can get a little weird, I think, kind of talking about your peers. So it'd be kind of like if a Blog to Watch was covering Hodinkee in coverage, I think it gets a little weird. So I don't know about that, but I mean, maybe we could do, I mean, if they're interested in me recommending other channels and do something like that. I don't know. Always looking for fun things to talk about. But so news, don't think it'll be very disruptive to the channel, but just so you all are aware, I do have a business conference, nonprofit conference that I'm hosting here starting next week. So I won't impact my plan to probably do another live stream next Saturday because I'll be back well before then. Don't know about videos during the week. Obviously, with the as I talked about at the beginning of the video, with the Zenith Chronomaster Original, I like to review after I wear it a week. That would be around Thursday. So I would be back to do that, but I have a lot of material I have to catch up on from my conference in the meantime. So long story short, I don't know that I'll do a pre-recorded video next week. I currently don't think I'm going to have time. There's a lot of post-conference stuff I have to do. And unfortunately, they'll probably cut into my lunch breaks and stuff. So, because I want to get it all caught up because I cannot stand being behind. So I'll plan to probably do another live stream on Saturday US time, but don't know if I'll get the review out on the Zenith by then. And if there's a first thoughts opportunity, I might be able to wedge one of those in because those actually take less time for me to do. But we'll just have to see because I don't know what's coming out. No one tells me anything early. I'm always just surprised like the rest of you. But that's it. Thanks again for tuning in. If you caught this as recorded, feel free to leave any comments. I try and read all of those. And I will talk to everyone on the next video. And I hope everyone has a good day and great weekend. Take care.